Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session about thriving in your first years of practice, starting your practicing period as a pupil barrister. We've got around 90 minutes today, so the plan is that the panel will start. We'll spend about 50-ish minutes, maybe an hour, giving our perspectives, and then we will move on to a Q&A. I know that the alarm klaxon has already gone off, but just to remind you all that the session is being recorded. Maybe we could start with an introduction from each of the panel members, perhaps starting with Stella.
Yes, hello. I'm Stella. I'm currently a junior tenant at 5 Essex Chambers. I completed my pupillage in September this year. So about a year ago, I was in the spot that I'm assuming most of you are currently in, about to get on my feet. Yeah, and I'll be talking a bit more about what that experience was like and my lessons learned.
Over to you, Amy.
Hi everyone, my name's Amy Hemsley. I am currently a tenant at Exchange Chambers practicing in personal injury. I finished my common law pupillage with Exchange in September, the same as Stella. So, like she said, we were both in your position just about a year ago. And I'll also be sharing my perspective and some kind of tips and little tricks that I have that help me get through this first year practicing on my feet.
Great, thank you, and Mariam.
Hi everyone, my name is Miriam Diaby. I am a policy manager in diversity, inclusion and corporate social responsibility at the Bar Council. My role involves supporting barristers and chambers and developing good practice across the bar, and I'll be sharing with you a few resources and support available at the Bar Council as you embark on your second sixth.
Great, thank you guys. My name is Lucy Burrows. I spent 25 years as a barrister's clerk, and I now work as an independent consultant and coach to individual barristers and sets of chambers. I'm also the chair of the Equality and Diversity Committee of the Institute of Barristers Clerks, which is a membership organisation of over 1,000 chambers employees, which has been running for over 100 years, so a long time. So I'm going to give you a clerk's perspective on what really helps a junior practice thrive in those first few years. I'm going to cover three things. The first is interacting with your clerks. Then I'm going to move on to fees, and then the dreaded business development. Well, maybe not dreaded for some of you. So just starting with the relationship that you'll have every single day of your practice, and that is the one with your clerks. In very simple terms, a clerk's role is to help build and protect your practice. So that means managing your diary, your fees, client relationships, and often helping you navigate pressure points before, ideally, they become problems. So for that reason, effective communication between you is absolutely essential. To begin with, the most regular contact you will likely have with the clerk's room is around your availability. And different sets of chambers will deal with this differently. Some will send an email across to anyone from their second, sixth, for the first sort of 5 years, asking about availability. Sometimes, depending on the set of chambers, if it's a bit smaller, the clerks may just call you regularly to ask about your availability. It's absolutely crucial that you keep them up to speed with what you're doing and how you are placed. The clerks are juggling a number of competing considerations in any given day. So that might be fair allocation, diary pressures, client relationships, and capacity across chambers. And an accurate diary makes sure that you firstly don't miss out on, interesting or important opportunities, but also it prevents you from being overcommitted and protects yours and chambers' reputation. So an example might be that if a clerk is offered a new case, they may not have time to phone each individual barrister to check availability. So they need to respond quickly, and they can only make the right decisions if they have accurate information about how each individual barrister is placed. It's also important that if you've got any diary constraints, so if you're got some extended learning, definitely if you've got caring responsibilities, be completely open, honest, frank with your clerks, tell them, and that will help them manage your practice, and make sure, as I say, that you're not overcommitted and that they're there to help you. In my experience, that time management is one of the biggest challenges that barristers have in early practice. It will take you time to get a sense of how long each task is likely to take. So if you're ever unsure about capacity or indeed prioritization, the clerk's room will help. I can reassure you 100% that anything that you bring to them, they will have seen before. So the clerk's room is there to help. We're there to make your life easier. So nothing that you can throw at them they haven't seen before, for good and for bad. Deadlines, just on that time management piece, at some point, and it may be that Amy and Stella talk about this later, I'm not sure, but at some point you may miss a deadline, or you may be fearful that you're going to miss a deadline. The clerk's role is to help you. So what matters most is that you communicate any concerns about capacity as early as possible, because one of the biggest frustrations that silks and clients have is when deadlines are missed and they haven't had any warning. I've had circumstances where a piece of work is due in, and the barrister, for one reason or another, usually pressure, sort of buried their head in the sand, and you can't reach them. And most of the time it can all be managed. So I really can't stress enough how important it is to be proactive about those conversations rather than reactive on this particular point. One of my biggest bugbears about the bar is the absence or lack of a proper feedback loop. I think you guys would benefit so much from regular, proper, constructive feedback, so that you learn what's going well, importantly, and how you can do better. So in the absence of a proper feedback loop in chambers, try to elicit that feedback yourself. So ask leaders, ask colleagues. You can do so directly, you can ask through your clerk. But please, I would really encourage you to try and get that feedback, because it will make you a better barrister. Most sets of chambers, and all sets of chambers, should have regular practice review meetings from, pretty much from when you're a tenant. So firstly, make sure those are in place, but don't wait for your practice review meeting for any feedback that you want. Be open about your aspirations and any areas of interest, because then the clerks can look for opportunities for you. Each individual barrister runs their practice in a slightly different way, has different things that they're interested in. So just be open. Hopefully most sets of chambers have a mentoring scheme. If you have one, use it. If you don't have a mentoring scheme in place, then you can ask to be paired with somebody informally. Again, go through the clerk's room, or if you'd feel more comfortable, just approach another barrister directly. Many of the specialist bar associations have mentoring schemes themselves, so you'd be paired with somebody outside of chambers, and I think that can be hugely effective. Sorry if this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Once I started writing it, there was just so much that I wanted to cover. So the second point that I wanted to talk about was fees. Each chambers, again, bills for work in a very different way, and each case will have its own sort of quirks, I'm sure. So I would encourage you, from now, you'll need to start recording your time. But try to understand how chambers bills for your work, or how each case is going to be billed. So sometimes it will be a fixed fee. Other times it will be time costed. There might be staged billing. If you're not sure, just ask the clerks. Gone are the days when I first started clerking where barristers just would not speak to their clerks whatsoever about fees. We do try to be much more open and collegiate now. There was a bit of a protectionist. This is our job, but just talk to us and be open about it. Make sure that you're recording your time accurately, and please submit your timesheets promptly. Delays in recording your times, it just drives everybody crazy. It delays billing and payment, and it's a real bugbear. The other point is that it's also really useful for you, looping back to my point earlier on the time management side of things. It will help you build up your own picture about how long work is beginning to take you and how long it's taking you. And on the same note, just try to resist the temptation, if you have it, to adjust your time to maybe make yourself look more efficient. So if a task takes you more time than you had expected, record it as it was and then speak to the clerks about it. This is really important, because we know from the research that the really important research the Bar Council is doing, that the under recording of time is likely contributing to the income disparity, the pay gap at the bar. So yeah, record your times as they come. If you've got a client that and I appreciate this isn't yet because you're just about to get on your feet, but please remember that if you ever have a concern about a client's credit risk, just raise it with the clerks. The checks that clerks do and firms do is pretty robust these days, but there might be changes that you're aware of that the clerks won't be. And the third section that I wanted to reference is business development. Now, at the moment, your most important market is going to be the internal one. So can I encourage you, please, to be visible in chambers? Go to chambers events, speak to silks, senior juniors, the other clerks, ask them about their work, take an interest in them, tell them what you're doing, and just build up that rapport, because the opportunity to work with them will come across in an organic way. If there are people that you want to work with, just be open and honest and say so. Working with them can just be, offering to co-author an article or write a seminar with them. It's not always just about that sort of, the new instruction, which hopefully comes down the line. In due course, start to build your peer-to-peer relationships. So without stating the obvious, the newly qualified solicitors will be regular instructing solicitors in due course. So just try to build up that relationship at some point. I'd encourage you from basically September. Secondments, some sets of chambers, start secondments, even for second, sixth barristers on moving into the first and few years of practice. Consider it seriously. I know of many silks whose relationships formed in secondment have seen them throughout their practice. Talk to the clerk's room about it, raise any concerns that you have. If you have any concerns, talk about the pros and cons of it. Make sure that you're reviewing your CV at least quarterly. So the work that you're starting to do now, you'll want to keep a note of it. Make sure you do that. Make sure that it's available to people. You're going to start getting exposure to lots of different things. So you don't want to forget anything along the way. And, start thinking of yourself as a small business. Maybe not for the next few months, but at some point, start thinking about putting aside a proportion of your income for business development and marketing opportunities, so that when any of those BD opportunities come along, you can consider them against the budget that you've set and any goals that you have. It needs to be a steady, consistent habit and not a one-off exercise. that's nearly it from me. But I also just wanted to say that the early years at the bar are demanding. You're learning how to be an advocate, but you're also learning how to run your practice. Your clerk's room is there to support you. That is their entire purpose. And we care deeply about your development, helping you to do the work that you want to do it well, and support you in any myriad of ways. So please look at it from that perspective. And from a clerk's perspective, what I can say is that the barristers who thrive tend to communicate openly, and they manage their practice carefully and are able to build relationships steadily. So if you approach your practice with that mindset, you can't really go wrong. Gosh, okay. I hope that was all right for everybody. I'm going to move over to Stella now.
Yes, hi. So I'm going to talk to you a bit more about managing your first months on your feet. And as you probably have already heard from other people, this period that you're going to embark onto quite soon will probably be the most difficult part of your pupillage. It definitely was for me. It depends on your practice area, of course. In my case, I did a civil pupillage and was in court about 3 to 4 days a week, sometimes more, and had quite a lot to manage during that time. So for me, that meant I was still doing work for my own supervisor. I was doing work for other members of chambers. I was preparing my own cases, of course, building relationships with solicitors, with the clerks. Then, of course, appearing in court multiple times a week, figuring out the logistics of getting to court, all that comes with that. Then, at the same time, at one point, I had to start thinking about my tenancy application, prepare that. And then some of you might also need to think about getting references. I know some chambers might require that. So it is quite a lot going on during this period of time, and it will be intense. In my case, one additional layer that I had was that I also have a 5-year-old son, and my partner has other kids as well. And so there was another layer of complexity of managing all of that. So with all of that you have going on, you will be trying to impress everyone at the same time, and it can seem quite daunting. And so, with that said, because obviously the title of this program today is Thriving in Your First Months of Practice, I thought I would give you just a few tips. And some of that will reflect what Lucy has said, and some of that may also be repeated by Amy again from a different perspective, maybe. You will probably be hearing some themes by this point. The first tip I have is similar to what Lucy has said, communicate. It's really, really important that you don't just go this on your own. You have lots of people that are there to support you, but they can really only support you if you talk to them, if you share what you're struggling with, if you share your questions, if you give them the opportunity to help. And so the most important people I would say for you to communicate with will be your supervisors, your clerks, and then other members in chambers that can help you whenever you're struggling with a case, whenever you're encountering something new. And then, of course, separate to that, you will have to communicate with your clients. You will have to really build those relationships. But starting with your supervisors and your clerks, if you have some other layer of complexity going on, like in my case, my caring responsibilities, make sure that you share that with them as far as you're comfortable. I sat down with every single one of my supervisors at the beginning of the siege, so to say. I also sat down with my clerks and we discussed in detail what my responsibilities are, how long it takes me to get to school to pick up my son, on which days I have to pick him up, how long it then takes me to get to court, if I'm available for last minute instructions and how that's going to work. All of that. And obviously, you want to show that you're engaged, you want to show that you want to pick up work, but at the same time, it has to be realistic. And so those are really, really important conversations because they laid the foundation for me to then be able to fall back on the trust that I've built. And if things went wrong or I needed help or I needed to rejig things, I knew that everyone knew what was going on in my life and could be there to support me. So that is the first big theme. The first tip I have for you is communicate. The second one, also similar to what Lucy has said, is stay on top of your deadlines. You're suddenly going to have a lot more deadlines than just some work you're doing for your supervisor or other members of chambers. Anytime you get deadlines in court, for example, you're getting directions for your case, make sure that you add them to your own diary. Stay on top of any written paperwork deadlines. There might be some administrative things you might have to do. And as Lucy has said, this is a time where you're still learning how long things take you. And I would expect things to take you much longer at the beginning, and with time, you will speed up. So don't panic if you feel like you're taking too long for a specific task. That's absolutely normal. You would just need to manage expectations. And I definitely had times where I felt like this took me a really long time, but then I talked to my clerks and I explained why it took me so long, just in case a client raises a question. No client has so far ever questioned how long I've taken for things, because obviously they also understand that this is an investment. They are investing into a very junior barrister right now that they can then work with in the long term. And if they're giving you a bit more time at the beginning to figure things out, to get it right, then obviously the next times they're going to instruct you, they can expect that you'll be quicker and have more experience. The next tip I have is use your resources. So it will again depend on your chambers, but in my case, for example, there is a really helpful WhatsApp group, actually several of them, where junior members support each other. Obviously, members in chambers that are in chambers physically that you can approach. There's, of course, your clerks, supervisors. There will be lots of people that you can rely on and use them as resources. Make sure that if you encounter something new, you run that by someone else, and don't feel like you have to handle novel situations all on your own. Really, most people that have experience at the bar will have seen lots of different scenarios already, and they will be able to give you some really valuable input. So do not be afraid to share your struggles. It's absolutely normal to be suddenly faced with lots of new situations and doing lots of new things in this job. Then my next tip is carve out time for yourself. I had to learn this and I have to constantly remind me to do myself to do this. But because this is going to be such an intense time, it easily happens that you just get so stuck in your work and with all of your new responsibilities that everything else completely falls by the wayside. So think about, what are your priorities for yourself? What can you do to regenerate, to give yourself some energy back, to give yourself some peace of mind? For me, for example, it's playing the piano or doing yoga. Might be different things for you, but the 30 minutes that you might spend, I don't know, spinning or playing an instrument or whatever you might be doing or reading, they're not going to, in the end, make you lose a case, or that's not the type of time that you're going to be missing with your work. It will give you a lot of energy and it will help you come back to your work rejuvenated. So I really, really encourage you to think about what you want to prioritize and what time you can carve out for yourself. And then the last tip before I go on to another section where we'll talk about what to do if then things go wrong, the last tip I have is to give yourself grace and to enjoy this period. This is something that other people have had to constantly remind me of is you're going to be in court. You're going to be doing the job that you've been working towards for years and years. Enjoy that. It's actually something really exciting. So try to remind yourself of the immense privilege it is to have this job and what joy it can be when you're getting better at it and having success at it. So the last thing I want to talk about is what to do when things go wrong. So let's say you're in court and things don't go your way, something, I'm not going to give you any details of what could go wrong, but obviously lots of things can go wrong in court. I tend to feel that the magistrate's court, for example, is the Wild West. You never really know what's going to happen. The first thing I would say, and I've heard this from another junior member who gave me this tip, is give yourself the gift of time. Never feel under pressure in the moment. You can always take time. You can always ask the judge for time to consider something. You can always ask for a very brief adjournment to give yourself time to think about something, to check with other members of chambers, to even check with the ethics hotline if needed. if you feel like you're in a tricky situation and you don't know what to do, you can always ask for time. I think that's really, really important. Um, and then coming back to what I've said before, use your resources, know who you can call if things go wrong, who can assist you. I've had one or two situations where I was in court and I felt like I need to talk to someone senior about what has just happened or what's about to happen. And again, my chambers is very supportive with that. I texted on our WhatsApp chat, and within second, I had three, four senior members that I could give a quick call. If you anticipate that something like that might be happening because you're going into a hearing that you've never done before, something very new, you can even line someone up. You can talk to people beforehand and say, "Hey, is someone available if I need help at the last second, if I need to call someone?" So you can even anticipate that. But yeah, use your resources, give yourself time. You can always carve out time. Don't feel under pressure and use your resources. And then the last thing is, if something has truly gone wrong, communicate again. Make sure that you talk to your clerks, make sure that you talk to your client. This is probably the situation where you want to write a detailed attendance note. But as long as you relay what has happened immediately and you manage expectations and you're open about it, that's where you can manage the situation best. What probably does not go over well is if you don't immediately communicate and the client then finds out some other way, or clerks find out some other way. So I would say, coming back to my very first time, first point is communicate. Yeah, those are my tips. And I think I'll hand over to Amy.
Thank you. Yes, so Stella and I are essentially covering the same ground. So you'll have to forgive us again, like Stella said, if there are some pointers that seem to be echoed over and over, but I think that just underlines how important they are. And I think everybody is going to take away one word from this discussion, and it will be communication. But I think what might be beneficial to everyone, and what was certainly beneficial to me when I started on my feet, was not just the importance of communicating and who to communicate with, but how you have to have a different approach depending on who you're communicating with. So, as Lucy and Stella have said, the first people you communicate with on a day-to-day basis when things go wrong or when you have a question are going to be your clerks and other members of chambers. And that's an environment where you can communicate pretty much how you would in everyday life, be open, be honest, and get some real feedback from people who are, on your level and on your team and understand what's going on. And then on the other side, you then, or at least I did, you then go into court and you have professional clients and you have, more importantly, lay witnesses who are usually people who've never been in court before and have absolutely no idea what's going on. So whereas you might be confused over a potential legal point and you're not quite sure how certain things play out, there are usually, or at least in my practice area in personal injury, people in front of you who've never set foot in a courtroom, who don't know how to address a judge, who have no idea what the words cross-examination or examination in chief mean. And I think the key point is it's important as an advocate and as a barrister to understand that communication has levels and that how you communicate and when is one of the most important parts of this job. I think it's very easy in your second six, certainly in your first few times in court, to feel extremely overwhelmed, to feel like you are the person in the room that knows the least, that you've no idea really what's going to happen, and you've just tried to kind of, at least in my case, make a long list of all the possible scenarios and get as much advice as you can to deal with whatever happens. But at the end of the day, you've then got to walk into a room with usually an uncomfortable, slightly agitated, slightly upset, slightly frightened lay witness, and it's your job to get them to give their best evidence. So I think the starting point for me would be tips on that. I think the easiest thing to do when you walk into a room with a client who's a bit nervous or a bit upset is to try immediately put them at ease. And I have made the mistake myself over and over again of saying, look, it's a small claim, it's just question and answer, like you're going to sit there, you're going to get asked some questions, it's going to be totally fine. It's not quite that simple. And I think we have a habit whilst trying to put people at ease to give a false impression. The fact of the matter is, cross-examination's not nice. It's uncomfortable, it can be upsetting, and the best thing that we can do in that moment is to prepare our clients for the reality. So I think my number one tip with clients, and when you're in conference before a court hearing where you have a lay person who's going to give evidence, would be to be as clear and as direct, but as honest and realistic as you can be. And usually I say to clients, look, this is going to be uncomfortable, and the other barrister's job is to disagree with you and tell you that you're wrong about all of these things and tell you that you don't know what you're talking about. And whilst it's important for us to put them at ease, it's also important for us to prepare them for that, because the last thing you want is a client that's going to go in and get really agitated and not understand what's happening to them and get totally flustered, and not give their best evidence. I think the second most important people to communicate with are court ushers and court staff. Second to your own clerks, they are probably the best friends that you can have if you are going to be in court every day. They are the people that can make problems disappear, and make your day much easier. I've had certainly days where I've ended up in a block list and I have a case in the morning and a case in the afternoon, and my morning case is in a block list with 20 others and could very well not get on until 3 o'clock. And obviously, when you've got another case that's supposed to go on at 2 o'clock, that becomes a problem quite quickly. And the only person really in that scenario that can help you are the court ushers, who, in my experience, thank goodness, always do a wonderful job and you put you at ease and make sure that the cases go on and they know who's where and it all works out fine. But I think when you're in court, it's important to kind of communicate with all of the staff, try and be as polite and obviously as direct as you can be, and make sure that everybody knows what's going on so that everyone can plan, and we can kind of get on the right footing early. I think it's very easy as a young barrister and your first few court appearances to get totally thrown by any small inconvenience that might come up. Travel is a major one. So whilst all best intentions, we'd all be at court dead on 9 o'clock when it opened, sometimes public transport, traffic jams, whatever, weather get in the way of that. And again, the only thing you can really do in that scenario is communicate. Ring your clerk if you need to, ring the court. If you can, get in touch with your solicitor, because it's happened to me and it will happen to everyone at some point. You will get stuck somewhere and miss a court hearing or be late for a court hearing. I had a train a couple of months ago break down with me on it on my way to court, and we got stuck for 40 minutes, just sat there going nowhere. We then got dumped out in Halifax, of all places. I was supposed to be in Liverpool. And I was on my way, and there was nothing I could do. You look at trains, you look at taxis, and it turns out, best intentions behind you, nothing is going to get you in that court at 10 o'clock. And all you can do at that point is go, look, I'm on my way, ring your clerk, they'll speak to the court, and then ring your solicitor and say, look, in case you get a message, I am on my way, I will be there, please let the client know. And it turns out everything got delayed by half an hour and we went on at 10:30 and it was all fine. It didn't feel that way while I was stood on a train platform in Halifax when I felt like the world was ending and I was the worst barrister in the world, because no one clearly had ever missed a court hearing ever before. But I think you find out very quickly when you ring your clerk that this does in fact happen quite a lot, and it's usually absolutely fine as long as you don't lose your head. I have a colleague in Chambers who told me a story after that particular event where she had to have a court hearing moved to CVP and do it remotely from a broom cupboard in a train station because she got stuck and there were no trains coming in or out, and she had to literally get the maintenance staff to take her to a little cupboard where she could open her laptop and do a court hearing. So after that, I don't think anything any of us experienced could quite be that bad. And the fact to remember is there's always a way around it, and if it's out of your control, that's just how it's going to have to be. I I think the other key point to raise in your second six is preparation. And like Stella touched on, preparation is one of those things that you don't really understand until you're doing it every day. You don't really know how long it's going to take you. You don't really know exactly how to approach it because everybody has a different style. And a lot of different types of cases will require a different type of preparation. But I think the main thing to remember is the first port of call for barristers when you're going into court is going to be your instructions. So always for me, I note my instructions. If there are points in there that the solicitors have directly asked you to raise, I always bullet point those first and make sure. The second thing to check, and my instructions generally have these, is the list of documents that's attached to them. Because I cannot tell you how many times it's happened where I have gone to court and opponents have turned up with extra images, extra videos, dash cam footage, and things that have just been missed off an email or missed off the bundle. But it turns out they were in the list of documents that were in your instructions. So it's really important, especially with images and videos, to kind of try and keep a note. And as you're preparing, my best tip is to keep a list at the top of your Word document or whatever of queries while you're going through. It's very easy in a witness statement to see, oh, the image of this is attached here. And then when you flick down, that image isn't there. And whilst you're going through, you'll probably forget that. But if you keep a little note, you'll end up at the end with 20 questions and queries that you went, oh, yes, I'd forgotten about that. And it's a good thing to keep a list of. And also, it's then a good point to kind of touch base with solicitors before you go into court. Usually I find it's easier to give them a quick call, and then it's a good open space and opportunity for them to kind of share their perspective, ask any questions they might have, and gives you a good kind of foundation to have a brief discussion before you go into court. Obviously, if you don't really have time for that or it's not convenient, you can send them a quick email. But I think it is always good to open that line of communication, and then at least you find out whether the email address you have does actually work, and make sure that you can in fact get in touch with someone if you need to on the day at court. And then my final tip regarding the court diary is always check your listings the night before, because the clerks, as Lucy said, have, tens of diaries all together, and they, at least at my chambers, they send the listings out, and sometimes you won't realise that something's been moved to video or something's been moved to a totally different court. And the best thing that you can do as a barrister is check the court orders within the bundle, because sometimes they will clue you in that your case that's listed in Sunderland is actually being heard in Nottingham, or all of these things, and it saves you a phone call from your clerk at 4:30 the day before going, I'm checking the Sunderland list and your case isn't on it. But it also saves you going to, for example, Derby when you're supposed to be in Nottingham, which did happen to me 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I think that's the point. It's kind of all under the communication heading, but those are kind of my perspective on the key questions to ask and the key things to take. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the point about business development. So I think as a very junior member of Chambers, it's easy to think of business development as something that is more important when you're an older barrister and you have all of these kind of professional clients and you want to go to these dinners and you're winning awards and all of those things. But actually, I think business development is the most important when you're at the younger end, more junior end, because this is when we are making connections and building relationships and getting exposure. And I think the way I always think about it is that Chambers, especially in the department, so from my own perspective, our personal injury team, is that it's a team. So it is helpful to everyone for solicitors at events to get a good impression of you, but of Chambers as a whole. And I think it's very easy to kind of just think of business development as, oh, well, I'm going to pick up cases in different areas, when in reality, the things that I've found that drive instructions are attending training sessions, preparing articles, doing that kind of work for solicitors, going in and giving talks when you're asked to, going in and helping more senior members prep mock trials and things like that. And that's the thing that gets more exposure, and that helps everybody. So I think everybody who engages in business development is helping chambers as a whole, and that everyone is then bearing the rewards of that. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, that business development isn't this kind of extracurricular activity. It's part and parcel of our job, and it is what will get you good instructions down the line. Okay, thank you. I think I'll pass over to Mariam now.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to cover 3 different topics. The first will be the ethical inquiry service. The second will be support and resources available to you. And the last one will be talk to spot. So in terms of the ethical inquiry service, which was mentioned earlier by Stella, the ethical inquiry service is a team of advisors at the Bar Council with an expertise in the BSB handbook. I'm part of that team, and our job is essentially to help you navigate through tricky situations that come up in your practice so that you are able to confidently interpret your professional obligations, and so that you're confident in making the right ethical decisions in the moment or as they come. I should emphasize that there are no silly questions. They range from barristers and pupils asking whether they can provide legal advice to family and friends, to having a clash in your diary, what case do you pick and why, to your client not turning up to court and you not having a proof of evidence. It's far ranging, and we're here to help. So in terms of how you can access the ethical inquiry service, there are a range of ways. There is a helpline, and all of the numbers and details are on our website. We're open 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. There's no sort of silly question. We also run an inbox service that you can email and you'll get a response within a few business working days. We also have a ethics and practice hub, which is a website with hundreds of guidance documents with a lot of FAQs on a wide range of situations. Some situations are quite common, so those are written by barristers on our ethics committee and regularly reviewed. So we would advise to have a look at those in the first instance. But yes, so the ethical inquiry service is a very helpful tool to kind of know about, especially as you get on your feet and you may come across unfamiliar situations that aren't covered in bar school or even in your first sixth. So just as a key takeaway, there's no silly questions, and even if you are 95% sure of the right answer and you just want to bounce an idea of someone, we're very happy to do that. Most of the time people kind of are going along the right lines. So that's in a nutshell the ethical inquiry service. The second thing I wanted to briefly mention is support and resources available. As mentioned, that as you're going to continue building your practice, the first few years are particularly kind of demanding and intense, and it's really important that you find kind of healthy ways to juggle everything and be able to prioritize your well-being and get into a good habit now as your practice continues to build. So we would strongly advise to kind of use your networks, whether that's your supervisor, your all chambers will have an equality and diversity officer, an EDO, to reach out to them. If you're in an employed pupillage, your HR department would be your first point of call. We also have a wellbeing at the bar website, which covers kind of tips and resources and guidance on managing stress and imposter syndrome, to sleep, to burnout. As pupils, you also will have access to a confidential assistance program, which is all available. The details are on our Wellbeing at the Bar website, and that through the assistance program, you'll be able to access free counselling, and there's a 24-hour confidential support line. We would also advise reaching out, kind of continuing having a line of communication with either your circuit, your specialist bar association, and also your INS. There's loads of kind of initiatives and kind of keeping that rapport, especially as you're kind of on your feet and you're going across the country and going to different courts. We appreciate it can be challenging, so it is important to prioritize and get into a good habit of maintaining your well-being. And then lastly, on resources, is that we also have a pupil helpline, which is dedicated for pupils, and through that helpline you can raise any issue where ranging from all sorts of matters, but that is kind of specific for pupils. So please do make use of that. And the last point that I wanted to cover is Talk to Spot. And Talk to Spot is an anonymous online tool that allows you to raise an issue of bullying, harassment, or any sort of inappropriate behavior. Sadly, bullying and harassment happen in all industries, and including the bar, but the difference is that the bar is something that at the bar, it's something that we're actively tackling. As many of you may know, we had an independent review on the topic last year, looking at these issues in depth, and we kind of have a clear kind of action plan and a commissioner in place to oversee those changes and to ensure that the advice and standards are of high standard and upheld. So kind of building on that is the Talk to Spot platform, which we've been running for a number of years. And the issue that you raise doesn't necessarily have to happen to you. It might be something that you see in court or in chambers or at a work event. And if there's something that doesn't seem quite right, and you want to get steps on guidance or next steps, you can raise it via this tool. So it's anonymous, and essentially the purpose of flagging an issue on the tool is that you will have it will produce a timestamp kind of record or summary of the issue, and that will be timestamped, and you can keep it for your own record and then decide what you want to do. It's not it doesn't go to anyone unless you choose to. Should you want to get next steps once making this raising this issue, you can submit it anonymously to our team, and that will be reviewed anonymously, and then we'll be able to speak to you to figure out next steps, whether that's reporting or speaking to you to figure out next steps, or a member of chambers, depending on the specifics of that issue. One thing I would mention is just the importance of raising kind of an issue, no matter how big or small is that you think, is that through the anonymous reports that we can collect, is that if a number of people are kind of raising a particular issue relating to a certain person or an environment, then that sort of assists, and it can be incredibly powerful. So so if you see something, whether it's also, if you see something's happened to you, please do flag it. It's not all about raising formal complaints. It's just it's also a helpful way for us to build a clearer picture and to ensure that no one feels isolated if they see or experience something that's not acceptable. So those are sort of three broad topics that I wanted to mention that the Bar Council does offer. And so whether you're in need of like practical ethical guidance or support, or not knowing what are the next steps for something that you've seen or you've experienced, all of those resources are available to you. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will pass on to Lucy.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We have had a few questions in the Q&A box so far, but if anyone has any, please feel free to submit them now. There was a couple of questions just about billing at the criminal bar. To be fair, yes, sorry, I should have said. My understanding is a lot of that work is on a fixed fee basis, and on a task-based system. So you probably don't need to worry too much about that. But I still would just make sure that that's covered off across your chambers. The next question is, do you have any advice? This presumably is to Stella and Amy. Do you have any advice for navigating applications for third, sixth elsewhere, as well as tenancy at our pupillage set? I've been told it gives a bad impression if chambers find out you have applied elsewhere. Just from my own perspective, I'm not sure I've ever encountered somebody applying for a third, sixth somewhere unless that they haven't been successful in their tenancy application from their pupillage set. So I can't offer any insight, but I don't know, Amy, Stella, have you got any thoughts?
I'm unfortunately also not that helpful. My chambers at Exchange is a kind of a straight line from pupillage to tenancy, so we didn't have to do tenancy applications. But the idea of third, sixth applications and things like that were raised when I was still on the bar course when I was in London. And I think, as far as I understand it, there is an understanding that obviously if you are somewhere where the transition from pupillage to tenancy is extremely competitive, that in order to cover your bases, it may be that you need to apply both for tenancy at the chambers you are at, which is obviously the ideal for everyone, but on the basis that perhaps there are 10 pupils and 2 tenancy positions, just doing the maths, that the applications may need to be made to cover your bases only for third, sixth. But I think that would be a scenario in which I would seek my supervisor's advice, because I think they're in the best place to kind of give you advice on the impression and anything like that.
That sounds like good advice. Stella, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, also not exactly my area of expertise, but I agree that I would say find a trusted person that you can run this by. I probably wouldn't just go around chambers and with a list of all the other chambers that you're applying to. Um, yeah, maybe find a person that you can speak to in chambers and can just understand what the process is and how you can best handle that if you wanted to apply for tenancy somewhere else, um, or for a third, sixth. I would also say that my understanding is that chambers generally are handle these types of applications with discretion and confidence. So I would also operate on the assumption that they understand that you would be in a tricky position if that information was simply released.
Great, thank you. The next question is, this is for Amy and Stella. How do you manage getting last minute instructions the night before? And additionally for Stella, how do you factor this in around your real life responsibilities and manage to get enough sleep?
Oh, right. Good question. I would like to know how I can get enough sleep. In terms of late instructions, because I'm in a civil set, I don't get them too often. So it's not a weekly occurrence. I do sometimes get them though. And what often happens is that I have the case in my diary, I just don't have the papers yet. And so I am able to plan a little bit, and there will be a period of chasing the client for the papers. But if I get them quite late, I am able to anticipate that. Sometimes I do have to cover a case for someone else in chambers, and that might be last minute. But in that scenario, someone else will already be familiar with the case, most likely, and I can do a quicker handover. In terms of late instructions or late work, or anything else that would affect your sleep, I got used to the fact that I won't always get all the sleep I want. That's just a fact in this job. I think it's more a matter of making sure that you're balancing it out and you're catching up. There will definitely be some times where you might have to stay up late or you might have to get up early. I've learned for myself that there might come a point where it will be better for me to get up at 4 a.m. and start prepping with a fresh mind rather than staying up till 2 a.m. And then that's just going to work better for me, and I will then be sharper in court the next day. So really think about when you can be sharp and when your focus time is, and if you will be able to work better early in the morning, then that might be a better solution than staying up late. Um, yeah, but I'm not always getting all the sleep I need. I try to catch up when I have an opportunity, and that's the joy of being self-employed. There will be opportunities when you cannot catch up on sleep.
Yeah, I think to echo what Stella said, with myself, I do a lot of personal injury, so I do a lot of kind of fast track trials, and it is a trend for instructions to land very late, or for at least, like Stella said, for papers to land very late, and that means sometimes 4 o'clock the day before, and you're in court at 10. And obviously, on the days where you get a bundle at 4 p.m. and you need to be on a 6 a.m. train to wherever you're going, chances are you're not getting 8 hours of sleep that day. I'm lucky I don't have, dependents or anything like that to think around. So for me, at least, like Stella said, it is more of an assessment of, right, well, I'm probably going to need to get this sleep back at some point, but at least for today, it's just one of those things that you kind of just handle as it comes. But I think the other point to raise on that is there will be work going on behind the scenes. So I think it's important to kind of keep up to date and make sure that your clerk, I'm sure they already will be, but make sure your clerk is aware that what you have in your diary is a fast track trial, which is usually a bit heavier on preparation rather than a small claim or something shorter, and that you still don't have the papers. And absolute worst case scenario, if it gets to a point where, especially very early on in practice, you are becoming concerned that you do not have the proper amount of time left to prep this case before the court appearance, that being usually the day before, then there are things that your clerk can do. Get in touch, try and get you as much information as they possibly can. Sometimes, and it's happened very rarely, but when I was still a second six pupil, I've had cases swapped so that more experienced members of chambers who are slightly more used to picking up big fast track trials the day before take that one, and you get swapped into a case where the papers are all already there. That's rare. That's a chambers wide decision. Obviously, that will depend on your clerking and things like that. But I think, like we've continually said, the best thing you can do in that scenario is open the lines of communication. And if it really gets down to a point where you feel really uncomfortable and like you don't have enough time to do what you need to do, then you need to kind of let somebody know, and hopefully someone in chambers, either a supervisor or a clerk, will be there to help you out with that.
Thank you both. Please could you advise on how often you are able to bill, how often you are paid, and how you coped with this from a financial perspective? From the clerking side, again, I know each chamber does things slightly differently, but largely chambers will render the clerks or the fees team, depending on what the setup is in chambers, will render your bills at like once a month or every 28 days. The how often do you get paid point, again, depends on the type of work that you're doing, the kind of clients you're working for, and what the contractual arrangements are around the work that you're doing. So your clerks will send off your contractual terms, and there should be a stipulation in there around payment terms. So 30 days would be magnificent. 45, sometimes there's 60-day payment terms, sometimes there's 90-day payment terms. So it may depend on a few different factors one, what your chamber's kind of default position is, two, what the solicitors have agreed with your lay client, and three, the kind of organisation that your lay client is. So, kind of frustratingly, some of the big accountancy firms are actually the worst payers because they have such massive churning systems. So it can take like 90 plus days to get paid for those cases. So you shouldn't, I don't know of any chambers where the barristers render the bills, but that might just be my naivety, I suppose. But in terms of the conceptually, how often can you bill? Broadly once a month. It would be unusual for you to bill more than that. And the how often do you get paid? It is a kind of how long is the piece of string point, I'm afraid. Maybe others might like to speak to how do you cope from a financial perspective. I don't know, Amy or Stella, do you want to chime in about any gems that you've heard from people?
Yeah, I think the finances and the billing side are one of those areas where I think barristers know very little about what really goes on behind the scenes in billing. As far as my perspective is, I do the work, I send the attendance note, um, where it's a fixed fee or part of the fixed costs regime, I send a note to my clerk saying this is the fixed fee for counsel, and it gets billed and the money comes in as and when it comes in. I think it can be extremely daunting, especially, once you exit pupillage and you're then fully self-employed and reliant on that income. But I think the best thing you can do, and what I definitely did, was speak to the young tenants in chambers and, anyone you have a kind of good relationship with. And I was very lucky that people were very ready and happy to be totally transparent with me about the way that certain firms pay and the way that you can kind of expect income. Obviously, I do personal injury, which means that most of my cases for the claimants are on a CFA, which is obviously no win, no fee. So there are cases that I will do where I won't get paid because we lose. And there are cases that I will do where I do an application with the knowledge that this case is going to go on for 3 or 4 more years and you're not going to get paid until the absolute end when it's all tied off. So there's no kind of rhyme or reason from my perspective to be able to map it out. But what you can do is speak to younger tenants, speak to the clerks, look at the kind of demographics, and you can see a sort of trend and rely on the fact that, I've billed this amount, and usually 75% of what I build will come in the next few months. And you can kind of see a trend. I now pretty much on a monthly basis, and I think you should always take it on a monthly basis rather than a weekly basis. I will get paid a similar amount in dribs and drabs from different solicitors. But the best thing again is to kind of talk to people who have been through this road before and kind of can give you advice. And also, usually with chambers, if there are certain financial pressures or issues that you're having, there are usually things that chambers can do to help you. I've certainly had colleagues in chambers who have been able to get assistance from chambers, whether that's in the form of a kind of loan situation where they float you a certain amount on the basis that it will come back in billing because of certain situations that arise or things like that. But it is the fact of being self-employed and the fact of the work that we do is there is no absolute certainty from a financial side. But it does work at the end of the day, I think.
I would just add one thing, and this again will depend on your pupillage agreement and your chambers, but there might be an earnings gap. In my case, there was definitely an earnings gap of a few months. I had the award for the first 6 months, and then it took a few months for my first own income to come in. That might be different depending on your agreement, but that's something to plan for if you have that. Similarly, though, if there are periods over the course of the year where you're not working, for example, half terms, if you can't work during those times or over Christmas, that obviously there will then be a delayed earnings gap coming up. So also again something to plan for, which will be very different from if for someone coming from employed life as I did, where you can always rely on your paycheck.
Thank you both. On a similar theme, we've been asked, as a self-employed barrister, is it difficult getting used to dealing with tax returns, particularly where you've been previously employed? Amy, do you want to go first?
Only comment on that was the advice I was given, which is get an accountant. Get one early, get one straight away. And then no, I don't worry about my tax returns because I don't do them. I wouldn't know where to start on that. So get someone, it's really important, especially being a barrister, that it's done and it's done right. So if you can, obviously that is, I think, one of the kind of fees and charges that is almost essential.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. Your chambers will probably have a list of people that they would recommend. Place Campbell tend to be the kind of barrister choice individuals at Place Campbell. But yeah, I personally would always recommend to my barristers that they get an accountant. As a pupil, how do we approach billing and fees? Should I ask what my fees will be for different cases before I start my second sixth? Like a table of fees rather than finding out as I go along. I would, and actually just the second, there's another question from somebody else, so I'm going to wrap it up in the same and then invite others to speak. But do you think it's a good idea to sit with clerks before our second sixth to understand how they work better? I think those two things can be taken together, which is absolutely make sure, please, that you have an opportunity to speak to the clerks, sit down with them, just ask the pupil supervisor. I mean, good practice really is for the sets of chambers and the pupil supervisors to set that meeting up. You can either do it with your fellow pupils if you've got other pupils in the same intake as you, or individually, whichever you prefer, but definitely sit down with the clerks to get a better sense of billing and fees. In my experience, sometimes there were cases where a second sixth pupil might be asked to do something and we wouldn't charge them, the individual client, for that for a number of client relationship reasons. So it's probably, there won't be a hard and fast rule about different cases and what can be billed, in my experience and in the kind of work that I used to clerk. So yeah, I would definitely encourage sitting down with the clerks and getting a good sense of that. Sorry, I feel like I've waffled that, but yeah, others please chime in.
Absolutely agree. I think that's my experience as well. You will have a sense of the types of cases and the types of clients, maybe how they pay. In my case, I work a lot for different police forces, and there are certain forces that pay an hourly fee, others will only do brief fees. So you can get a sense of that. But yeah, talk to your clerks, absolutely.
Another attendee says, I also have a 5-year-old daughter. Stella, do you have any tips for maintaining a work-life balance? Do you feel that being a parent impacted either positively or negatively on your pupillage?
That's so lovely. So what I've learned in how I manage it and what works for me is that I have certain times that I protect. So with my son, I pick him up from school in London a few days in the week, and then we take the train to Canterbury. So we spend a lot of time commuting. That time for me is protected. I want to spend that time with him. We read books, etc. We have fun on the train. And then when we come home, bedtime, dinner, bedtime, reading, all of that is protected time for me. I will rarely ever work. I simply don't work during that time. And that's just my own boundary that I've set. Now, after 8 o'clock, when he's in bed, I will work. And so that's how I kind of balance that. Similarly with the weekend, Saturdays, that's again time with my son and with the rest of the family. Rarely do any work during that time. On a Sunday afternoon, however, that's where I catch up and I get prepared for the next week. Now, there will, of course, be exceptions, but if you have these protected time slots and blocks that you can give yourself, either for family time or for time for yourself, also, as I mentioned before, then that gives you a bit of sanity back. And you can avoid the mental struggle of constantly feeling like, oh, I should be working right now because it's out of the equation. It's you've already made that decision. Um, I do then, though, try to maximize the other times that I have. Any other commuting time, I usually work. I will often work later at night or early in the morning. I maximize the other times. So that's how I achieve that balance. But obviously, it's a struggle. I'd be lying if I'd say that it's all going great. The second part of the question, I think, is a really good one, is whether it's positively or negatively impacted. Um, I actually think it's positively impacted my work because it is additional life experience that you're bringing to the job. I've had many situations where I was in court and I was able to connect with clients, with people in court. There's lots of people that you'll be interacting with, and just building relationships. And you've having a toddler, having gone through all of that, you've experienced craziness, you've experienced certain pressures that are probably worse than the craziest day you can have in court. And so it gives you a certain level of resilience, I think. And so I focus on the positive, which is you have life experience, you're able to connect with people, and you are a very resilient person. And so I would focus on that.
Oh, I really like that answer, Stella. Um, so a lot of the work that I now do is with sets of chambers around retaining women at the bar. So, on a kind of broader point, I think that there's so much excellent work that's being done by the Bar Council, by individual sets of chambers. And in fact, Stella and I and Amy and Marion were talking beforehand about a book, which I sound like I'm the author. I'm really not. I wish I was, which is called Baby at the Bar. And it's written by somebody that Stella is in chambers with. And it's about navigating life as a barrister after becoming a parent. And it's just been released. So there are some really good, really great things in there. So I'm not paid to do that, sponsor. I might ask them though. Are there any tips for your very first day or case on your feet, please?
Yeah, I think first of all, first day on your feet, prepare for being nervous, prepare for having a bit of brain fog, having a very deer in headlights panic moment, and then kind of try and settle into the fact. In my chambers, it was a thing where the clerks may or may not have told the court ushers that it was your first day on your feet. And I managed to avoid it, but most pupils, I think I get the impression, are, you know, congratulated by the judge afterwards or, comforted by the court ushers beforehand before they go in because people know that you're brand new. I think in a lot of courts, if they've never seen you before, they know, especially if it's March time, they'll know that this might be your first day on your feet. And nobody expects you to be, a 10-year silk walking into court. I think that's an important point for every day on your feet for the first 10 years, is that you are not the finished article. I think it's very easy for people to walk into the court on their first day and go, well, I'm now a barrister, so I need to be absolutely perfect and I need to do everything absolutely right. It's not the case. We are barristers, but there are levels, and first day on your feet is the bottom of the ladder. But I think for kind of tips and tricks, try and get your papers as early as possible. Try and touch base. I was unfortunate in a way that my first case happened to be against a member of our chambers, which obviously they let us know so that I didn't ring her and try and ask her questions about the case that she was against me on. But members of chambers are usually quite happy to talk it through with you. We had, before I started on my feet, late advocacy training just between us where we could kind of practice a bit of cross-examination or the skills that we needed just to put us at ease. But yeah, I think try and prepare it as best you can and don't panic. Hopefully, your first day on your feet, they'll have given you something that's not gonna throw you for six. And just try and enjoy it. I mean, the first day on your feet, that's what we all worked for, isn't it? That's the kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, prepare to be nervous and just try and do the best you can, and it'll be fine.
Stella, anything that you want to add?
Oh, it was a very similar experience. You'll just be nervous but excited. Um, I had, it wasn't my first day, it was my second day. It was a really tricky POCA, full on all day trial. And I felt like I have no idea of what I'm doing here. And being on the applicant side, I had to be the one running the show and getting the case to move along. And by the end of the day, I felt like I learned so much. And yeah, it'll be a challenge. It might be scary on that first day, depending on what case you have. But at the end of the day, you feel like you've really achieved something.
Great. Mariam, do the Bar Council have any training on imposter syndrome for when we get into court on our feet?
So there is no training on imposter syndrome per se, but there are a lot of events across the bar that regularly address this issue. I know that a couple of the inns ran events last year. From my experience, imposter syndrome is something that is experienced by a lot of barristers from all years of call, including in silks. As you progress, there are just different challenges, and then there is just another sort of comparator pool. So I think what's key in terms of keeping this addressing imposter syndrome is having a really good support network, having mentors, uh, whether that's in your chambers and or in your area of practice or in your cohort, realizing that you're not alone, that it's a shared experience amongst many barristers, is part of the experience, and it is very helpful. So yes, it's a normal part of practice, of the experience. And I guess I would just finish by saying that it's important to remember that you're here for a reason and you've worked really hard, and to make good use of your support network, because it's a shared, it can be a shared experience. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add in terms of imposter syndrome.
I don't, other than Middle Temple did a talk a while ago. Maybe that's what you're alluding to about imposter syndrome. So I think it's quite a common feeling, isn't it? Amy and Stella, as a pupil, do you know where you are going to, sorry, where you are going a week ahead / 7 days in advance?
I can kind of take that one from a very junior PI perspective, and the answer is absolutely not. You have your diary, things are in it, things will come out the day before, other things will go in. Like I said earlier, cases will get moved from one court to another by the court at around 4 o'clock the day before. I think hopefully you'll be in a similar area and your clerks will kind of keep a handle on that. I'm hoping that none of you will be in a situation where you've already travelled down to stay overnight somewhere and then you get moved to the other side of the country. But it is a kind of, especially at the junior end, and especially in my practice area, it's a very kind of flexible and unstable working pattern. So no, I would not rely on my diary the week before. I generally only tend to look 2 or 3 days in advance as far as travel and things like that are concerned. And if there are any cases where I think, okay, I need to plan to travel, and I can stay down there, it's something that I communicate with my clerk, so that if I've decided I'm going to stay in Birmingham because I have cases in Birmingham and Nottingham, my clerk will know that, so that if one of the cases gets moved, they're aware to kind of let me know and help me manage that.
Think for me it's a bit more predictable, which is nice in my situation. Um, I do typically know a week in advance, but I have to be flexible because, as Amy said, things can come out, things can settle, or new things can come in. So it's definitely not the type of job you want to have if that type of flexibility freaks you out. Um, I typically don't book train tickets far in advance at all because you never know. So I would book them the earliest the day before probably, but probably on the morning off. I am, I think, quite lucky in that I have a certain level of security in the sense of I know where I'm going the next week.
Do we have any recommendations for systems or software for managing finances, deadlines, etc.? The practical stuff. Just from my side, I have always worked with Lex as a sort of diary and finances perspective, and we managed our deadlines through that as well. But others might have better advice.
Yeah, I think it will depend on your chambers will have the software for your diary and all of that. What I use for keeping track of my hours is Toggle. That works really well for me, but I'm sure there's other kind of timekeeping apps where you can just keep a track of the minutes you're working and what case you're working on throughout the day so that you can then bill. Other than that, I have a basic, a paper diary, which works for me. And I would say make sure that any deadlines you get put in your into your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar you use. Oh, and accounting, there's Dext, is good for expenses.
Anything, Amy, or are you
No,
similar?
agreed. I think
Yeah.
chambers usually have a system, and I also use Dext on the accounting side, and it makes it a little bit easier.
Fab. When we join a particular circuit, how much socialization is natural byproduct of being on circuit versus proactive steps to meet people and organize small socials? Is the profession simply one that is naturally predisposed to gelling quickly, or is it something to consider if moving to a new city?
I think the bar is social in a way, and I think the factor with that is it's about circuit and things like that are as social as you want them to be, or perhaps as your diary allows them to be. There are plenty of events on circuit with other chambers, with kind of pupillage groups and things like that, that are there all the time if you want them and if you can attend them. And that's a really kind of good way to go. And I think when you do attend those groups, I think it's really good to kind of, join the group chats, get the phone numbers, and then you've got a kind of backup group of people that are there, and you can kind of make arrangements as and when and ask questions and things like that. But I think the fact of the job is, depending on, what you do and how you do it, is you are on your own for a lot of it. There's no kind of group. You're not in an office every day with the same people, or at least not in my practice area. And although you'll come across the same opponents semi-regularly, there's no kind of guarantee or confirmation that you'll meet the same groups of people or that you'll be able to socialize on that front. So I think it is important to kind of put effort in to a certain perspective to go to events and to meet new people. But there are plenty of opportunities there if you want them. And of course, with chambers support and things like that, I think most chambers are quite happy to assist in setting up socials and events and things like that, and can give you a kind of a point in the direction of good contacts to have.
Fab. Just conscious we've got 6 minutes. So, is it advised to come into pupillage with some savings to buffer ourselves against delays in payment? Are there any particular periods in the 12 months of pupillage where cash flow is particularly tough? I suppose my response to that is yes, if you can come into pupillage with some savings, marvelous. Some people can't. And I think that's what the pupillage award is for. But Stella and Amy will probably be better to speak to it.
Yeah, I did have to use some savings at some point, but that's also because I had lots of other expenses if you have kids and all. Um, I wouldn't let that deter you. If you don't have savings, you'll make it work. Um, on the gaps, that's what I've already mentioned, is that there might be an earnings gap once you're on your feet. Again, it depends on your chambers and the agreement you have with your chambers. And then throughout the year, if you don't work during certain times because you're on holiday or for whatever reason, there will be a delayed earnings gap following those periods.
Amy, I'm going to assume that you haven't got anything to add. Fab. Off the back of the billing question, what do you find the delay to be generally between the work and getting paid for the work? I'd love to give you a rule of thumb, but I'm not sure I can. I'm really sorry. Certainly, when we used to look at sort of age debt reports, it would be grouped into 3 months, so 0 to 3 months, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, and so on. It would be really normal for things to trip into the 3 to 6. So I think you should probably assume, Amy, Stella, chime in if you think I'm wrong, but I think you should assume 60 days is probably normal. Nodding, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry to say that I've known fees be outstanding for a lot longer than that. Most people, I actually really want to be positive. Most people, solicitors and lay clients, respect the fact that when you're very junior, you don't have a book debt to lean on. So I want to caveat it saying it's not all doom and gloom, but I think it is important to be realistic, that there will be times where, yeah, you have fallow periods of payment. So yeah, that's tricky. Do some pupillage offer a salary? I think it's just pupillage awards. Is there anyone else? I don't know whether I think that's right, isn't it? And I actually think some sets of chambers are not necessarily so good about allowing paid work in the second, sixth, but I'll just skip over that. If that hasn't answered your question, come back to the Bar Council separately. Are there any challenges specifically for young female barristers in chambers? Well, I'm going to hand that over to Amy and Stella as young female barristers.
That's it's a slightly tough question. I mean, I think in my chambers, I'm very lucky. I chose exchange for the environment and things like that, and I personally haven't had any kind of issues on that side, and I certainly have a very good structure and people who are very much invested and make sure they check in on certain things. But I think obviously there are, for some young women, different factors that come into play, whether that's family commitments, whether that's external factors and things like that, health, anything like that. And I think, like I said, the best thing that you can do is kind of find that support network wherever you can and find, whether it's supervisors, whether it's clerks, whether it's anyone. And if you have concerns, raise them in whatever way you feel comfortable, whether that's reaching out to the Bar Council or reaching out to pupils at other chambers who you have a connection with, and try and kind of work out where that supportive network is, and hopefully where we're at, your concerns can be raised and dealt with, and you shouldn't feel that it's a bar to your career progression. And because obviously women can do just as well in chambers and at the bar, and we're making real strides to kind of get ourselves up there and in silk and in the same level as the men.
Yeah, I'm not sure if young is the operative word for me, but I'm very similar to Amy. I feel like I'm in a very fortunate position that my chambers is extremely supportive of women, and it actually there's a very strong cohort of strong female barristers in my chambers that are all role models and are one of the main reasons why I've chosen that chambers. So maybe not the most reflective of the experiences others might have. I would say one, there is this typical mold of what a barrister looks like that I had in my mind when I first considered embarking on this path. And I quickly realized that I can just forget about that and I'm going to do my own thing and it works. So that's one thing I would say. And the other thing is find some people that you can trust and that can be mentors for you, that you can talk to, that can kind of help guide you if you are in a tricky situation and you feel like something is just not right. If you have someone that you can talk to in your chambers, even if it's just one person and it doesn't have to be a woman, can be anyone that you trust. I think that will be really helpful for you. So I would recommend that.
Tell us some horror story. I'm just going to rattle through just quickly some horror stories about what not to do. I'm particularly keen to hear Lucy's anecdotes from many years as a clerk. I've been sworn to secrecy on all exciting horror stories and anecdotes, but you can speak to me separately. No, the best piece of advice: just don't be late with your work if you can avoid it. Be polite, be nice. And don't slag off other people at the bar if you can avoid it, because you never know who knows anybody else. And I'm just going to take two more. So if we have disabilities, do you think the best course of action is to inform court staff and the judge beforehand in case they misunderstand or say something if it comes up? Yes, 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 yes. Assuming Amy, Stella and Mariam agree with me about that. Oh, yeah, there's two more. Is it possible to be not available for one day, i.e., Wednesdays in the week because of other commitments? In other words, can our diary be blocked by the clerks for that particular day? Yes, it can. Within reason, there might be other times where you've just jumping in. There might be a case if you've got like an 8-week trial or something that's not going to fly, but communicate it with your clerks. They will accommodate you as best they can. And sometimes they may say, look, there's this great case. Can you take it on, even though it will require working on a Wednesday? Amy, Stella, Mariam, presumably, have you got anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I haven't. I would maybe be careful to just completely block out a certain day because, yes, at the beginning, you do want to be available to pick up the right cases for you. What I've done was I gave my clerks certain times where I asked them to check with me first. And so they know for certain things, if it requires travel far off on certain days that I wouldn't be able to make pickup from school, they will check with me first, and then I have an opportunity to consider it. So that way, I'm also not losing out on cases that I might want to take.
Good point. What apps and or devices do you tend to use to find best? Do you find best to prep cases and stay organised?
I might be a bit of a tech phobe on this one, but I think usually I just prep with a side by side of the papers and Microsoft Word. But I think it's one of those things where you know what's best for you and everyone will do it differently. I have for certain types of trials templates, which is just basically the kind of structure and the kind of outlay and questions and the way that it works, just so I don't have to spend 10 minutes every case listing out witness statements and cross-examination and things like that. But I think it's very kind of a personal, you'll find what works for you as you go along.
Great. So thank you, everybody. I think we'll wrap up there. The recording will be available. If you have any other questions that are burning, then please feel free to get in touch with the Bar Council team, and we'll aim to answer them as best as any of us can. Assuming no one else has anything to add, we'll say good night.